and welcome to this episode of the Maryland Risk Management Education Podcast. My name is Paul Geringer, and I'm the Extension Legal Specialist here in the Department of Ag and Resource Economics at the University of Maryland. And today you're not going to hear me other than this and the end of the podcast giving you Emily's contact info, but Emily Zobel has put together a good podcast covering some of the issues with farm stress that you should be aware of. So this kind of continues on our farm stress series. But Emily is an extension educator in Dorchester County for University of Maryland Extension. So I'm going to turn it over to Emily.
Hello, listener. This is not Paul. My name is Emily Zobel, and I'm the agriculture educator for University of Maryland Extension in Dorchester County. I've temporarily taken over Paul's podcast to talk to you guys about farm stress and stress management. I don't think it will surprise any of our listeners to hear that farming is a stressful occupation. Between the unpredictability of the weather and its effects on crop yields, to rising and falling commodity prices, potential sick animals, and the general isolated nature of the job, farmers can suffer from chronic or long-term stress, which can eventually lead to things such as depression and even suicide. That's why I'm thankful to have Jeanette Jeffries, a family and consumer science agent from University of Maryland Extension, Anne Arundel County, joining me today. Welcome to the podcast, Jeanette.
Thanks, Emily.
So, Jeanette, let's start off with an easy question. What exactly is stress?
Great question, Emily. So let me give you a little bit of historic background. In 1936, there was a doctor by the name of Hans Selye who actually coined the term stress, and he defined it as the non-specific response of the body to any demand for change. Now, you'll see lots of definitions out there, many iterations on this definition of stress. But again, Hans Selye said that it's the non-specific response of the body to any demand for change. Hans Selye was an endocrinologist, meaning someone who studies hormones in the body. And through experimentation, he found that animals exhibit a predictable pattern when faced with a stressor. So what's a stressor? A stressor is something that causes stress in the body. So examples of stressors are, like starting with the obvious right now, our current COVID-19 pandemic and everything that comes with it. Other examples of a stressor may be financial strain, family relationships, health issues. If we're talking about farm stress, it could be something like the weather or tariff prices. These are things oftentimes that are totally out of our control.
Okay, now, is all stress bad, Jeanette?
Emily, we could not live or survive without stress. You see, our bodies are set up for survival of the species. When something's coming at us to do us harm, our body's stress response kicks into what I'm sure you've heard of as that fight or flight response. And that allows our body to fight off our opponent or to run away and save ourselves for another day. But understand that the stress response is the same in the body if you're under stress because you're worried about how you're going to pay your bills, to if there's a car careening towards you as you're driving down the road late at night. In a millisecond, just like snap your fingers that quickly, our body responds to stressors by an amazing array of things. So let me just list a few for you. We'll take that analogy example of when a car is coming at you. It's late at night. All you're thinking about is, oh, wouldn't it be great to be home and lay my head down on my pillow? And you're on a dark, windy road, and right around the corner comes a car with its high beams on, and it's veering into your lane. At that millisecond, your brain needs to decide, am I going to veer to the right, to the left, slam on my brakes? What am I going to do for survival? So in that millisecond, our body does the following. Our hearing actually becomes more acute. When I say more acute, what that means is it becomes better. We can actually hear better when our body is under stress. Also, a whole lot more blood starts flowing to the brain. You may have been sleepy a couple of seconds before, but right now, your body is what we call the alarm phase. It's woken up to this stressor, and it needs to make sure that it is going to survive. So more blood is going to the brain because blood not only carries oxygen to the brain, but it also carries nutrient, food, for the brain to be able to survive when it's got to make these quick decisions. The pupils of our eyes, they actually dilate. They get bigger in size to bring in more light. You may also realize that when you're under stress, we start to perspire more. We sweat. Our respiration actually increases. By respiration, I mean we breathe faster. You know when you're under stress and it's like, so that is bringing in more oxygen into our lungs. And with that, our heart rate goes up, our blood pressure increases, and the really cool thing is that our body on any given day actually stores up energy. There's two main places where our body stores food for us to be used later on. That's in our liver and in our large muscles. Because here's the deal, Emily, if you're coming after me to do me harm, I can't say, wait up, friend. I have to go eat something to get some energy. You know, you will pummel me by that time. So what happens when I'm under stress to be able that fight or flight response, if I've got to fight you off, I've got to make sure I've got enough energy to carry me through so I can survive. So under that time of stress, my large muscles and my liver start sending out that broken down glycogen called glucose, that blood sugar, and that goes to all of my cells to feed it. So cool, right?
Yeah.
And then have you ever had the situation where you've been under stress and you tried to eat something and it just didn't sit right in your stomach?
Yes.
Okay. Or like some people might get cramping feelings. It's because during stress, digestion actually halts. It stops.
Wow.
When we eat food, it goes down into our stomach, and we've got two different ways that we can digest food. We digest it through chemicals that are inside of the stomach. We also have mechanical digestion, and that's when our stomach walls grind the food that's in there. But here's the deal, that takes energy in order to grind up the food. And our body, when it needs to survive in that millisecond during fight or flight, that's an accessory organ, digestion. So what the body does in its survival mode, it pulls the blood away from those stomach muscles and it reroutes it to our large muscles, our arms and our legs, and also to the heart so it can get up to the brain. So again, always think survival. And so we then also see that our muscles tighten up, right? You felt that when you're stressed. So like you may see people who are stressed, their fingers may clench, or have you ever had, for me, I hold my stress in my neck and shoulders. And so you can always tell when I'm under stress, it's like I wear my shoulders as earrings. They're up, way up by my ears. And if you just happen to like push on my shoulder and say, Jeanette, put your shoulders down, that's when I realize, oh yeah, it's all that stress that I'm holding up. So our muscles tense up. And then another really cool thing is that our blood clotting ability actually increases when we're under stress. Now think about this, Emily. If we're in a fight and if you cut me, heaven forbid, that blood clotting at that site of where I was cut will hopefully very quickly stop the bleeding at that point.
Yeah.
So what we see is that again is the survival so that I don't bleed out. Initially, during stress, our body sends out a whole lot of white blood cells. They fight off bacteria and infections. And so if I'm cut, not only will that blood clotting help to stop bleeding at the point, but those white blood cells will all rush to that area and hopefully get rid of any bacteria or anything else that got into that cut. And so initially that's great, but over time, if we have long-term stress in the body, our immune system actually starts failing us. It decreases our immune system. So we're not able to fight off infection as well the longer that stress goes on. So The question that you asked, is all stress bad? The question should be if it's long. So if we, like I said, we would not have survived as a species without stress. The problem comes in when stress is long-term, what we call chronic stress. Dr. Sellier also defined stress in two separate categories. So there's what's called distress, and that can lead to illness and even death in the body when it can no longer cope with that long-term stress. But then the flip side of that is eustress. So it's just the word stress with EU in front of it. EUSTRESS. Eustress is actually beneficial to the body. So things like happy occasions, this can bring about stress, but in short spurts, which can serve to exercise our stress response system to keep it healthy when we really need it. Keep in mind though, one person's eustress can be another person's distress. Sure, and this is when we start getting into trouble in our body. If we don't recognize how stress is affecting our body, then it, like I mentioned, long-term stress can cause our immune system to start weakening. So remember I said that first phase of stress is the alarm phase. And all of those things that I mentioned happen in the alarm stage during that fight or flight response so that our body can get through, can survive.
Great.
The next
that was all really
phase
good information
in our body that it goes through is called the resistance phase.
So,
and in
you talked
resistance,
about
our
chronic
body is
stress.
constantly
I'm still here.
trying to lower
Sorry.
all of those things that we talked about. It's
Yeah,
trying
I'm
to
still
bring
here.
our
Sorry,
heart
I had
rate
myself
down. It's
on
trying
mute
to
because
bring
my
our
cat
blood
jumped up
pressure
in my
down.
lap and she was
It's
meowing.
trying to get our immune system to calm down.
Okay.
And
that was all really great information.
Trying to
now, you
return
talked a lot
to a
about
state
what
of
happens
balance.
to the body
So nothing is
short-term
calm
wise
when we get to
we're
that
dealing
alarm
with stress.
phase.
Can you talk about
And
some of the
then
effects
under
that
the
chronic
resistance
or long-term
phase,
stress has
our
on the
body
body?
again is just trying to bring us back to that point of balance where things are calm. But unfortunately, when we're talking about long-term, what we refer to as chronic stress, and our body is constantly throwing out all of those stress hormones to keep our body going, our immune system can be weakened and lead to the point of exhaustion. And that's the last phase of the general adaptation syndrome. In exhaustion, at that point, we are much more prone to illness, disease, and even death. And so you may have heard people say that stress can kill you. Well, that's not just an adage, it's absolutely true. That if your immune system becomes so weakened, it cannot fight anymore and can indeed lead to death. So let me go through a few categories with you just so you can understand where stress can affect us. So physically, so headaches, backaches, eating problems.
I know I eat when I'm stressed.
There you go. And isn't that the interesting thing though, Emily? Again, not one size fits all. When I talk about eating problems, with some of us, when we're under stress, we may eat a whole lot, but some of us can't eat at all. And in fact, it could be situational. It could be that some stressful conditions cause you or prompt you to eat more and others not. So even in one person, that response may be different depending upon what the stressor is. So sleeping problems, as I mentioned, a lot of us are having problems, and that is very common. So don't think you're alone if you're experiencing that or any other stress that's related to COVID-19 stress that we're globally feeling at this time. So frequent sickness, as I mentioned before, we've got our immune system that over time just can start to fail if the stress is chronic. That leads then to exhaustion. Now think about, Emily, how you feel emotionally when you're under stress. Again, this is different perhaps from stressor to stressor. It may be that one stressor prompts you to feel very sad. It may even lead to depression. Some people may feel angry or anxious or bitter. Sometimes a loss of spirit. You know, you may have been just lighthearted and feeling at ease, but now you've kind of lost that zest. Or maybe even you've lost your sense of humor. All of that is under the emotional impact of stress. And the behaviors that someone might exhibit when they're under stress is they may be irritable or even acting passive aggressive toward another person. They may be angry. They may also use coping skills that may not be healthy, like increased drinking or taking drugs. And we do know that when people are under stress, that it can also oftentimes lead to isolation, and violence may occur as well. So that's all under behavioral side. Now, the next category we talk about is the cognitive. Now, cognitive means the way in which your brain is working. So we're talking about memory loss. If you've ever been under stress and you're like, I cannot remember what I was supposed to do, that is a true stress response right there. You may also find, isn't it? I know a lot of times, particularly as we get older, we keep thinking, wait a minute, is this age related? Well, with stress, it doesn't allow us oftentimes to think clearly because there's a chemical, a hormone. Remember I said Dr. Hans Selye was an endocrinologist. Endocrinology is the study of hormones. Well, there's a hormone that they found called cortisol that our body releases when it's under stress. And if you just think about like a tornado whipping around, think about that same analogy inside of your head. That's like what cortisol is like inside of your brain. And it doesn't allow you to concentrate. It doesn't allow you that being able to remember things. Your head literally feels like it's in a swirl.
Is that why people who are under stress have a hard time concentrating on things or making decisions?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And making decisions about even simple things. Things that you never even would have thought about before. Now all of a sudden you just get stuck. I don't know. Do I say yes? Do I say no? So a person might just get stuck when they're under stress. And then the thing is though, so that's under the cognitive side. The thing is though, how does stress also in long term affect our self-worth? With chronic stress, it can leave people feeling like they're a failure or like you just mentioned, Emily, like you can't make a decision.
Yeah.
That might lead to thinking, I can't do anything right. I can't make a decision. I don't know which way to go. I'm not able to fix anything. And so this can affect overall self-worth.
That's great information. Thanks, Jeanette. What are some things that people can do to help manage their stress? I know a lot of people think if I'm stressed, all I have to do is solve whatever is causing my stress. But we oftentimes are stressed because of things that are out of our control. Are there any great strategies you can recommend to help manage stress?
Another great question, Emily. So I do have a few to mention. The first one that I'd actually like to practice with you, if you've got a couple of seconds for that, is a deep breathing technique. So deep breathing is when you're mindful about the air that you're taking into your lungs. We never think about breathing on day to day. So this deep breathing technique actually makes you pause and think about breathing in and breathing out. And there's a very quick technique that we call the 4x4. And it's based on the count of 4. So it's breathing in for 4 seconds through your nose, and then it's holding that breath for 4 seconds, followed by releasing the breath for 4 seconds, and then holding for 4 seconds. And then you repeat that pattern 4 times. So when you breathe in, you want to breathe in with enough force that you are going to expand out your chest. So it's a big inhalation through the nose, puffing out your chest, and then holding for a count of 4. And then the exhalation should be just as strong as the inhalation. And the thing that I like to tell folks to do when I'm teaching them this 4x4 is right now, do this, Emily. Take the tip of your tongue and put it right behind your front teeth at the roof of your mouth, just the tip.
Okay.
And that will cause your mouth to open. Now blow out and make a sound when you blow out. It should be like,
Yeah.
so that you can hear it. So we're breathing in. Let's do at least one of these together, Emily. You want to try it?
Yeah, let's try it.
We don't have to do the whole 4x4, but just let's do it one time. So breathe in strong through your nose at the count of 4. So through your nose, 2, 3, 4. Hold that breath. 2, 3, 4. Blow out, tip of tongue, roof of mouth. 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. So then we would repeat that 3 more times. And that would give us our 4x4. So these are things that you can do if you're under a stressful situation, say with another person. You can just even do it right in front of them. Or if, say, you're a farmer and you're out on the field and something is starting to stress you, and you can do this. So it's a very quick way of just, again, being mindful of the air that we're taking in and blowing out.
I really like that one, Jeanette. I like the fact that it only requires your lungs and your breath, which is something all of us have with us all the time. I do want to say, listener, if you do this and you find a 4 count to be too hard, feel free to drop it down to a 3 count and just repeat it again 4 times.
Excellent point, Emily. I know many people like to practice yoga as a means of managing their stress, and meditation as well. Really, any type of exercise can help to lower our overall stress. And when I say exercise, I don't mean that you have to have a gym membership and hit the weights hard. Just simple walking is exercise. And sometimes just removing ourselves from an area where we're feeling a lot of stress can be very helpful. And the really nice thing is that when we exercise, it helps us to get that hormone level down. Remember, we talked about our body trying to return to a state of balance? Well, exercise can help to do that. It can help to lower our overall stress hormones, which is a great plus. Another couple of things that we can do, self-talk is a big thing. Remember, we just discussed about self-worth?
Yes.
When we're under chronic stress, feeling like a failure or that you can't do anything right or you can't fix things. Well, there was a saying that I read, be careful what you say to yourself because your brain is listening. And I love that. And so we can have the counter effect if we can give ourselves some positive self-talk where you write down some positive phrases, like say even on a sticky note. And you can put that in your mirror. I had a gentleman at one talk that said that he would take the sticky and he would put it on his dash in his pickup truck because he was in his pickup truck multiple times during the day. And so he would write down positive messages to himself. Yeah, and I love that idea because then it allows you to, again, be mindful. And so these things were just allowing him to go back to those positive messages instead of the negative that oftentimes runs in the background in our brains that we oftentimes don't even think about, much less challenge.
Yeah, I like that one. Again, it's a very simple thing that you can do to sort of help give yourself a more positive outlook.
I agree. And the other thing that folks can do if they're under stress is connecting with people in your social network. And again, during this time of COVID-19 pandemic, we're told to social distance. But it was interesting, if you remember, they changed the terminology because they said, no, we don't want you to stop socializing. We want physical distance, not social distance.
That's a great point.
Yeah, so social distance is still connecting with your network. And the nice thing is that there's multiple means that we can still stay socially connected. Back in the day, it used to be the old letter writing, just, a pen and paper. But today we have other things, like we have our phones that we could use. We have things like this podcast that we can connect and learn information, different platforms on computers that allow for face-to-face connections. So it's still allowing for that social interaction, even though we're physically distant. And the one last thing that I would like to say in managing stress is speaking with a mental health professional. And sometimes the stress within our body can be enormous, and the stressors that pile up, and many times out of our control, may lead to tremendous amount of stress within the body. And talking to a trained mental health professional may be the best thing to do and the mentally healthiest thing to do.
That's some really great information, Jeanette. If our listeners wanted some further resources about how to go about helping someone under stress or getting help themselves for stress that they're feeling, do you have any recommendations on places that they could go, either online or phone numbers that they could call?
Yes, I do. So one really good resource is just the number 211. Calling 211 or going to 211.org on your computer will allow you to speak with a community resource specialist in your area who will help you find services and resources that are available. And there's so many different areas where they can help. In the area of food, housing and shelter, utility assistance, substance use, healthcare, children and families, aging and disability, legal and tax services, veterans, domestic family abuse, and employment. So calling 211, which I think is a very little known resource out there, can provide you a wealth of information.
Another great resource for our farming community is the Center for Rural Affairs, and you can find information about resources to help farmers with stress, as well as financial resources and other issues on their website, which is www.cfra.org. If you'd also like more information about stress, and specifically farm stress, check out the University of Maryland Extension's farm stress website at extension.umd.edu/farm stress management. That's extension.umd.edu/farm stress management. Thanks so much again for being on, Jeanette. If our listeners have any other questions about stress management, is there an email address that they can reach you at?
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been such a great pleasure. And my email address is JeanetteJeffrey@umd.edu. That's JJEFFREY@umd.edu.
Thanks again for being on, Jeanette.
Thank you, Emily.
And thank you, listener, for tuning in to this episode. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to Jeanette or I. My email address is ezobel@umd.edu. We hope that you found this episode and the resources provided to be useful. Please take care and stay safe.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening. If you have any questions for Emily, I put her contact info down in the show notes. You can get in touch with her. And if you have any thoughts, ideas, questions for future episodes, please let me know. My contact info is down in the show notes as well. Thank you again for listening, and enjoy the rest of your day.